Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Know the Facts. We have a very controversial show tonight, so I'd advise you to listen. No guts, no brains, the nothings in this town, and they will never be any. Who do you have to pick from? The finance committee are all zeros. The school committee is all zeros forever. We all know, I know it. Because what about you? All are afraid to do what you want to do. Say anything gutless. You don't want to say a word to them because you're all gutless. Please resign and move out of town. Because looking at you look at rats and crooks. The police station or nothing. I hope you get the bills. Hope you get the bills. They have all the black. Marks against the person's name because the meeting starts because they all have broken the open meeting law to reject the letters. Then, as long as their friends get in, who cares? One person is a dumbhead, and he follows, not his own man, and that he's not his own man. Does what he wants set up for him to do. The police come. Don't vote for anybody who deserves it. No one. You're all puppets, and you know your own name and woman. The Apollo only votes for the woman. The police station could not school, and not another day to build a gulag instead of a Russian jail. One of you people gonna smarten up. We need a police station. That's if the superintendent hasn't stolen all the money for us. I think he has. Another topic in town. It was at the town meeting. A certain town meeting member can't understand why two selectmen can only come up with two suggestions, and the other five selectmen don't say a damn word. What's going on here? Was this fixed? What, you guys rehearse? Two selectmen, and you're the only ones who give the suggestions to the matter at hand. Why? Don't the board say a thing? They worry about why follow two losers, and the ones who give all those suggestions who should be disbarred and resign and lose the election are DePaulo and Casavan. He thinks he's something. Anybody can be a chairman. Donald Duck can be a chairman. I'm gonna call him Donald Duck from now on because he looks like it. He's got the ears for us. And Casavan, she's just plain nosy. Nosy person. This town must come to an abrupt halt and start realizing it's a town. And the statement Sweeney made, he's going to have a $400,000 deficit if he don't go back to school. I hope the deficit's on him. I hope the town comes in and takes it on the eminent domain and let the state run the schools. It'll be a lot more honest, I tell you that much. People they have now in the school department are the traits they always will be. And the finance committee, they should grow up. They're spending more money than Connor's got pills. Anytime that school department comes up with big tiers, they give them all the money they want. Well, the school department is the ruination of Shrewsbury. Don't give a dime to the school department. Don't give one stinking dime to the school department. or a library or anything. It's the biggest waste of time. It's the biggest crooked deal you could ever have. Just smarten up. Your house comes first. Your kids come first. Your wife, husband comes first. Smarten up, people. Smarten up. Use your heads. Use your heads. Use your heads. I'll get back to this in a later show. Okay, Doc.
Okay, you're all set?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go through a couple of things here. First of all, as you know, I like to start out with a couple of rants before I get into the topic of the day. I don't want to talk much about COVID-19. That's all you hear nowadays. So the topic for today for me is what we call the dirty dozen. Foods that we eat that we shouldn't be eating. So, but first of all, let me get those rants out of the way so I can be more coherent.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm very confused because the World Health Organization very recently came out and said they've done contact tracing in China, for example, and they determined that people who have no symptoms from the coronavirus are not, very rarely, they said, will spread it. Well,
Yeah.
so what the hell? You know, here we've all been, every age group, we've been placed in our house, shut down the schools, shut down the businesses. If we're asymptomatic, for God's sakes, why all those shutdowns? So makes no sense whatsoever. And that's true of anything that is either federal, state, and even local. So I'll tell you, it gets mind-boggling sometimes. Number two, I'm very upset over the fact that all of these federal, state, etc., are minimizing the effects of that COVID virus on the elderly, on the seniors. They minimize it. And 42% of all of the deaths are in nursing homes or in the assisted living facilities. 42%.
Yeah.
And that's just in those facilities. You look at the number of seniors who have died, 60% of that total of all the deaths are in seniors. Well, for God's sakes, it's a great way to get rid of seniors, isn't it? Well, they're not doing a damn thing about it either. At least our governor is trying. So I'll give him credit for that.
They won't do that.
Otherwise, you don't see too many others trying to help. So, another thing too, on the 15th of this month, they're supposed to be opening up the town hall and all of the town facilities. That includes, apparently, the senior center. Now, the senior center is a social being. They encourage people to talk about things, to get together. Like Rogers Cafe, like the knitting group, like all these things. People have to congregate to talk about things. Now, that's going to be a very difficult task to just open it up without much guidance. So far, I haven't seen much guidance coming from the senior center. So that's a big issue for me. We have an upcoming election locally too. And I want people to understand it's very important as a senior to vote. Vote for someone that you feel is going to be supportive of senior issues. I'm not going to name any names, but you've got to look at those candidates. Who of those candidates is going to support the seniors and their issues? That's all I have to say about that. So, okay, let me get into our topics now. Topic, as I mentioned, is what I call the dirty dozen. The dirty dozen.
Hey, Dr. Claremont.
Yeah.
What do you think of Donna O'Connor?
Well, she smiles a lot.
Yeah.
But she's very condescending to the town manager. I got to admit that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they're boyfriend and girlfriend.
well, it wouldn't surprise me, I guess, would it? But we'll leave it at that. I don't want to rant about her at this point. Okay.
She's,
So let's talk about the
she's
foods
no
now.
good. She's nosy.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess you have to be nosy if you want to run a show. I guess you have to be a little nosy to do it. But
Yeah, but the only problem is she tells the town manager what to say and do.
yeah, that's what he does. And that's what he does. And he does that because of people telling him. He has no original thought.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know. But
Who knows?
that's at the local level.
Who knows is right.
So let's get into a couple of these dirty dozens, okay? We're not going to get through all of them, obviously, but number one, added sugar. Added sugar. And I'm here talking about refined, granulated sugar, okay? We have a limit as to the amount of added sugar that we should eat every day. For a male, that should be roughly 150 grams, 9 teaspoons, roughly, 9 teaspoons of sugar. So that's in 1 can of Coke. 1 can of soda has 9 grams of sugar. So that blows it for the whole day for a male. For a female, it's only 6 teaspoons or 100 grams. So they've blown it totally. They have 1 can of Coke or 1 can of unsweetened, sweetened soda. So let me talk a little bit about, like I said, about the sugar.
Yeah.
Added sugar causes overweight, obesity, number one. Obesity leads to type 2 diabetes, leads to hypertension, high blood pressure, leads to elevation of your triglycerides. All bad things for your heart. So you need to limit the amount of refined sugar that you take. Now, the sugar industry is very good at hiding the fact that added sugar, is in their product. Very careful. What they do basically is they give it a different name. They may call it fructose. They may call it galactose, lactose, maltose, sucrose, xylose. They call it all these different names. And so you don't realize that is basically sugar, added sugar. So you've got to be very careful. Like I've told you many times, you got to read that label. You got to count those numbers in order to get an appropriate amount only of sugar. Now, I also need to mention in there, number 2, not only added sugar, high fructose corn syrup. Why is that bad? Well, fructose is very sweet, much sweeter than regular sugar. Remember, regular sugar, sucrose, granulated sugar, is half glucose, half fructose. High fructose gives you a higher percentage of fructose in it. So why is that bad? Well, number one, these syrups that they add, and a lot of things do have high fructose corn syrup in them. If you look at the labels again, you'll see a lot of products have high fructose corn syrup in them. And it's not healthy, not healthy.
Yeah.
So you've got to limit that. You should not have more than 25 grams of fructose in your diet every day. That's it. So you've got to cut down not only on sugar, but you also have to cut down on high fructose corn syrup as well. People who have a lot of high fructose corn syrup have actually gained weight. They gain weight. 2 reasons. Number one, there's a couple of hormones One is called ghrelin. Ghrelin. It increases the ghrelin. Ghrelin increases your hunger. And number two, another hormone that goes down with high fructose corn syrup is called leptin. By decreasing that, you increase your hunger. So it makes you hungrier when you go ahead and have the high fructose corn syrup. That's basically it. So I don't know. My screen is just cut off. No, I'm back on again. Okay, very good. So that's number two, high fructose corn syrup. Number three is, and I want to keep it in context here, artificial sweeteners. Artificial sweeteners. Things like, say, aspartame, NutraSweet, that's aspartame. That is very sweet, much sweeter than regular sugar. And you'll find aspartame in a lot of the drinks, a lot of the juices, the sodas, etc., have a lot of the aspartame in it. What is the bad thing about it? It's a neurotoxin. It can cause headaches in some people. It can also be a carcinogen because when you break down aspartame, you get eventually methanol and formaldehyde. That's why you get headaches. Some people get headaches from aspartame. You got to be very careful about using this. Now, they've already banned a couple of artificial sweeteners like saccharin, for example, cyclamate, for example. Those are already banned in the United States. But you've got to be careful too, because these artificial sweeteners have an effect on the gut bacteria. Remember, we had a whole session on the microbiota, all the bacteria in the gut, and the relationship of the bacteria to your brain, to the different organs that you have. So you've got to be careful about using too much of the artificial sweeteners. Let's talk for a minute about saturated fats. Now, we know that we're not supposed to eat a lot of saturated fat. Saturated fats are a whole group of solid fatty acids. They're solid, by and large. The Heart Association, American Heart Association, tells you you should not take more than 5 to 6% of all your calories in the form of saturated fat. The saturated fats actually are very long chain fatty acids, long chain, many carbons and attachments to the carbons. And they come in three different categories: long chain, medium chain, short chain.
Yeah.
The long chain are mostly like, say, palmitic acid. That's the most common one that we have. Roughly, what happens when you have too much palmitic acid in your diet? Cholesterol goes up. Bad cholesterol goes up, LDL. So not a good thing, obviously. So that's why we're supposed to limit the fatty acids, the saturated fats in our diet. Now, there's some good fats as well. In fact, some of the saturated fats, the short chain fats, are actually not bad for you at all. They're things like butyric acid, propionic acid, acetic acid, all these things. But the problem is that they're not defined well. When they tell you just eliminate all meat in your diet, oh, for God's sakes, you don't have to do that. But you do need to limit it. Limit that saturated fat, and don't be afraid of using things that have the short chain fatty acids in it. So that's number 4. Number 5, trans fats. We are all now at least accustomed to hearing about the bad parts of trans fats. Well, why are they bad? Oh, they're bad because what they do is they elevate the levels of bad cholesterol in your body. Now, the trans fats are just hydrogenated unsaturated fats. So if you see that word hydrogenated, even though you don't see trans fat in there, trans fat is zero, we'll say. If it's hydrogenated, it's trans fat.
Yeah.
Nobody is more deceptive to people than politicians, number one, and number two, some of the people who manufacture a lot of the so-called nutrients in our society. So you've got to eliminate trans fats completely. Okay, that's trans fats, number 5. Number 6, processed foods. Process. What does processing do? Well, first of all, not always easy to define. In fact, even our government has trouble defining what a processed food is, because anything that's been subjected to either washing, cleaning, cutting, cooking, freezing, drying, mixing, all these different things are forms of processing. So using that as a guide, everything practically has been processed, but you don't have to eliminate everything that's so-called processed. For example, the baggaged vegetables that you have are very minimally processed. They're just cut up, put in a bag, for God's sakes. So what happens, though, is that a lot of the processing added things to a natural raw product. That's where the problem comes in. These are the heavily processed things. Pizza is one of the worst. You should not make pizza part of your regular diet. It's okay to have an occasional pizza, but you've got to be very careful about the heavily processed foods. Hot dogs. Hot dogs are very heavily processed. Now, if you saw how they're made, it would turn your stomach, actually, because a lot of these are, and you read the label, they'll tell you mechanically derived meats. Well, what it means is that a machine is tearing that meat off the bones of either chicken or turkey or beef or whatever it is. Then they process that meat. They make it into a big slurry. And that slurry then goes into either skinless